What's up, everybody? Wes Dead Air Knife here with Always.
Typical Lydia.
Today's show, we're going to be doing the 1997 slasher classic, I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Oh, well, happy 4th of July to you too, Wes. I had hoped to get this out in time, but I mean, that was a really perfect fireworks sound. You'd almost think that we had fireworks here ourselves.
Well, we can never forget about Canada Day. I did forget, just as it happens, that this film takes place during the 4th of July. The film wasn't released, interestingly, during the summer or around the 4th of July. It was released in October of 1997. But regardless, they even have a full-on Happy 4th of July line that our killer will say. So this is, if you're looking for a movie other than Jaws and Uncle Sam, this is a 4th of July horror film that you can sink your teeth into.
Now, this is a 90s teen horror cycle, as it is known, film. And one of the usual suspects, I would say. We did The Faculty, which also fits in there. We're going to do Urban Legend, which is an unsung one that I really enjoyed at the time when I was not a fan of these sorts of films. And I will say, watching I Know What You Did Last Summer over again, for the first time since it came out, it wasn't bad. You know, I really actually enjoyed it more so than I would a lot of the other films in this cadre, especially the worst offender of all, Scream. I was not a Scream fan. And that's part of why we're not doing Scream for this and picking some of the like undersung ones and I think more interesting ones, like the very twisty turny I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Absolutely. I will leave the discussion of Scream to our horror betters who have lots of nice things to say about that film and that franchise. We, however, are going to be talking about this film, which, to be fair to poor Scream, is a direct result of that film's success.
Yeah, we couldn't ignore that. You know, it has many similarities. It even shares cast members. When you talk about sequels to Scream, it shares a writer and producer. Shares a lot with Scream, doesn't it?
It really does. This film was based off of a 1973 book by the same name, and this particular book Lois Duncan had written was rushed into production. They needed something. This over at Columbia Pictures, which is owned by Sony. And this happens a lot when you are making films. When something is successful, somebody else is going to say, ooh, make me one of those. And at this juncture, it was Kevin Williamson who was given the nod to adapt this book into a screenplay. And this goes back all the way to the earliest days of Hollywood, particularly talkies. Let's not forget that after the success of 1931's Dracula, Todd Browning was tapped on the shoulder by MGM to out-horror Dracula. This is the guy that directed what would be the first official new type of horror film in this brand new genre, this newfangled genre called horror. Todd Browning would do it, and he would make Freaks for MGM and subsequently ruin his career for all time. But we're not talking about Todd Browning's Freaks. That's for another day. Kevin Williamson was on a hot streak, and we are really touching a lot of films that Kevin Williamson had his hands all over. Of course, The Faculty was a rewrite by Williamson that Miramax, who had the first success with Scream, had him do. The Golden Boy, make this successful like Scream. And it got pretty close, not as big, but it still made its money. Now, Columbia Pictures saying, Williamson, make us a Scream, and he kind of made them a Scream.
He did kind of make them a Scream. It has a lot of the same things. It has a floating head one sheet. What more could you need? Yeah, it's got the twisties and turnies. It's got a dark sensibility. It's got that urban legend feel where they sort of ignore it, except for at the beginning when this is a campfire story beginning where they talk about the urban legends of the man with the hook. And I've heard different versions of the guy with the hook following a couple to a lover's lane or something and screeching his hook against the car, and then they find the hook in the handle of the car, or like whatever variation of it. They talk about that a little bit. So it is that sort of meta recognition of horror as a genre in the world where the horror is taking place. So they have the same information that we do. It doesn't help them like it does in Scream, in this film, very much. A little bit, but not as much, and it's not as tongue-in-cheek meta as we would call it nowadays. But it is that exact same sort of world, so it does share a lot with it. And before I talk about books a little bit more, like this sort of thing has happened a zillion times, not just with Todd Browning's wonderful films, which I'm a fan of. I mean, Steamboat Willie gave us Steamboat Scratchy, and we have, of course, Terror Train. Like in the real world, Wes is cracking up. I can see him. He's on mute, or else he'd be splitting our ears. But even his dog's excited. That was a good joke, Liz.
Sorry, I do mute my microphone so you don't hear my fucking mouth breathing while Lydia's talking. That's good stuff, man.
But yeah, it's Sean Cunningham has himself ripped himself off, like that sort of thing, owing to the one unexpected, outside of the box, blockbuster, feel good hit of the summer slasher. That's happened a zillion trillion times. And it happens in literature as well. Now, there's two books to talk about right off the hop. We have the 1990s teen horror cycle by Alexandra West. And I'll read the back of this book just for fun, so we know what we're talking about here. Many critics and fans refer to the 1990s as the decade that horror forgot, with few notable entries in the genre. Yet horror went mainstream in the 90s by speaking to the anxieties of American youth during one of the country's most prosperous eras. No longer were films made on low budgets and dependent on devotees for success. Horror found its way into magazine covers, fashion ads, and CD soundtrack covers. Girl power feminism and the growing distaste for consumerism defined an audience that both embraced and rejected the commercial appeal of these films. Now, I will put an asterisk there that she talks in the book about the other films that were very popular in the 90s, like Candyman and like Silence of the Lambs, like huge, awesome horror movies that are beloved, that we kind of forget came in lockstep with these. This in-depth study examines the youth subculture and politics of the area, focusing on films such as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Idle Hands, and Cherry Falls, which I totally have never heard of. I don't know if I watched it and forgot about it, but yeah, Alexandra West.
It's Brittany Murphy slasher film, quite good.
Oh.
I would love to cover that film one of these days.
Oh, maybe we will do another 90s horror cycle once we've spent our load with this one. Alexandra West has written about genre films for the Toronto Star, Rue Morgue magazine, and Off Screen Film Journal. In 2012, she co-founded the Faculty of Horror podcast, exploring the film's analytical side with Andrea Supasati. Her first book was Films of the New French Extremity, also out by McFarland Books. She lives in Toronto, Ontario. And the other book I want to talk about is in meta fashion. I'll mention it from a quote from Alex's book. It's the original book that I Know What You Did Last Summer is based on, written by Lois Duncan, published in 1973. And I'm quoting Alexandra here, who goes on to quote Duncan. It's like meta on meta on meta. Duncan was never a fan of the film, citing her experience going to see it in theaters. It was just plain more commercial to have things happening as they did in the movie. The movie was a shock to me. For one thing, the book was written in 1973, and I'd almost forgotten that I'd written about it. So she goes on to talk about what's not in the book that is in the film. which you can expect when adapting a screenplay, but there was a lot more murder. This is a horror film. She had written a cozy teen mystery, and she was very shocked. And like we were talking about before we started recording, go look at the Wikipedia profile picture of Lois Duncan and imagine subjecting this poor woman to a slasher film.
It really is egregious. She's so lovely, and the photos are gorgeous of her. So I'm just like, oh, this poor woman.
She goes on to say, I thought, maybe I've walked into the wrong theater. So I was preparing to leave, but then, nope, up from the bottom rolled the words, I know what you did last summer. And I thought, this is my book. But who is that man? And what is he doing with that ice hook? Well, I soon found out he was going to decapitate my characters. Their heads were flying off, and blood was spurting, and everyone was screaming, and I was screaming. I was so horrified, I couldn't even open my popcorn. It was quite the shocker. They kept me from the production as much as possible. I think they were afraid of how I might react if I realized what my little masterpiece was going to turn into. So while it does follow the same trajectory as Duncan's book, the lives of a group of friends are threatened after a hit-and-run car accident. Williamson adapted the story into a more traditional slasher narrative. So I really do want to read the cozy little mystery that is the 1973 Lois Duncan version of I Know What You Did Last Summer. But I was pleasantly surprised. Like I said, I did enjoy this watching it as much as I could because I knew what I was in for. It's a 90s teen slasher film, whereas it's not an extreme horror film. The scares are not, very, what's the word? I'm like visceral. And the gore isn't super, super duper visceral. It's more gory than I remembered. And it's going to have like a final girl. So my favorite people, the villains, are going to be cardboard cutouts at best and not save the day. Well, not win the day, more like it.
Yes, you're not going to find anything necessarily subversive. You're going to find a more sanitized version of the slashers that became popular in the 1980s. This was what I suppose elevated horror would be from the 1990s. Nowadays, it's A24, but here, this is the sleaze drained out of the formulas that a lot of people were allegedly becoming tired by. I don't buy that narrative at all, by the way. This notion that people don't like to watch the same things over and over again, that's complete garbage. People love to watch the same things over and over again, and there is an entire industry of sequels and remakes to confirm my point. Obviously, there are some examples in which films do something interesting and original, but by and large, people want their pablum. Like, not to be a dick about it, but there is, and by the way, I am guilty as fucking charged. In that I am not putting myself above that whatsoever. I also seek to look for the same comforting formula in a slasher film. That's why I think this television series for Friday the 13th is complete rubbish. I can't imagine anything more stupid than trying to pull the taffy on Jason Voorhees and his mother for an episodic series. What are you talking about? It's tits, it's a knife, it's a mask, it's a lake. Kill people. What are we talking about here? But I don't want to get in a whole
No,
thing.
really. No, I get it because like I've thought about this often and people are going to hate this. This is a hot take. This is where AI might come in handy because could you imagine the woman in black, but he walks down different hallways candlelit all the time because AI can just generate different maps. Same movie, different haunted house. Oh, God, we'd die and go to heaven.
But this film was attempting to make a slasher film, but Williamson clearly didn't want to just make another Scream, or at the very least, didn't really anticipate or understand what critics liked about Scream. And the thing is critics did like Scream quite a lot, as did the audiences. Is why it made so much money. That meta commentary shit, the idea that you can enjoy something that is kind of sleazy, but you can act as though you're elevated above it because it's somehow, in your estimation, making an intellectual comment on how ridiculous a slasher film is. And then you could say, good, it's making fun of it. I, an intellectual, can enjoy it, which is always my take on the success of Scream. And this film doesn't do that. This film, people think that there's slick, witty meta dialogue. And to the point in which I think a lot of people, Lydia, were like you, who had watched this film back in 1997 or somewhere in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then they just kind of homogenized it with Scream, not really understanding how different these films actually are. And whereas they don't necessarily shy away from violence, it also at the same time, like you had said, isn't very violent. What they do shy away from, which is very indicative of the time, is the nudity. No boobs. You believe that?
I can believe it. I can believe it, considering the fact that we were saving the boobs for the teen sex comedies of the time.
That's something I literally have never thought about. All the boobs were in comedies. That's fucked up.
It is. I watched quite a bit of raunchy comedy at the time, not by my own volition. You know, it was just on and people rented them. And that's where a lot more of the subversion, the filthiness of raunchiness. There are more serial killer jokes made in comedy at this time, I'm sure. But I hadn't really thought about it much because, of course, I'm owing a lot of my insight here to Alexandra West's book, where she mentions at the beginning of the book in some of the introductory chapters about what else was going on in film. Because it is, it's a film book by a film fan for horror fans by a horror fan. They talk about horror for sure, but there's a lot of background about where we were sociopolitically in the US for the most part, who was driving these films and where these actors mostly come from, right? So there's a lot of talk about what else was going on in film at the time, in specifically that 1990 to 1999 era. And there was a lot of raunchy comedy, and I remembered a lot of it. And I don't really watch comedy. I don't really like comedy very much unless it's extremely good. None of the stuff in the 90s was very good, but it was a lot of titties. But they were trying to do something different, or they needed to do something different with horror by this point. So I can see why there were less titties going on, especially with these specific actresses who were being taken very seriously and were being worked very hard. They were taking their careers very seriously, and in a lot of films.
The main cast of this film is actually remarkably small if you think about it. It really doesn't circulate far beyond the core 4 group of teens. This film, starring Jennifer Love Hewitt, she had success with Party of Five, which is where I used to watch Party of Five, and I remember Jennifer Love Hewitt from that. Sarah Michelle gellar really getting her big break with this, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer coming out in the same year. But you also have Freddie Prinze Jr. and Ryan Philippe. Like people, Philippe and Sarah Michelle Gellar would work again with each other with Cruel Intentions. But these actors would, and Gellar and Freddie Prinze Jr. would be in those Scooby-Doo movies, and they would get married. Isn't that cute? But the
that's super adorable. But I didn't watch any of these shows, and these people were strangers to me, and still, except for Sarah Michelle Gellar, largely are.
Yeah, but I would wonder if it's just, I think this is really where our age difference, as slight as it is, really is kind of showing itself, because I really feel as though these films were marketed towards me specifically, because they're like, look at this, Wesley, a galaxy of stars, and Jennifer Love Hewitt, you love her, she's beautiful. And I'm like, I do love her. People with money, I do love her. But the thing about it is, it seemed like what I had said with The Faculty really holds true with this film too. Yet another thing that was just a steady diet of pop culture that was coming out at the time. And so to realize the significance of these films now is very interesting, because I could tell you with all honesty, these films crossed my threshold and they were gone. This was not something that I wallowed in with any sort of obsession. You went to go see these films in theaters, or you would rent them on VHS, and then you would watch them with your friends, and then you would forget about it. Sometimes it would be on in the background, or you would catch it on television, which is why I think some of these films now need far more appraisal with their historical significance, which is why I'm glad that books like the 90s teen horror cycle exist, because we can finally sit, it's been decades now, and really figure out why these were working with this particular audience and time. But fuck all that, Lydia. We've been talking for 20 minutes now. What is this movie even about anyways? I think we talked about it a couple times, but go ahead.
This movie is really, really honestly about what you did last summer. No, it's about red herrings. Red herrings abound, and how you need some pretty strong writing chops to make those red herrings stick, because a lot of these just don't really work. Or is that the intention? Seeing as this is not necessarily an written as or intended as a serious entry into the annals of horror history, it was a summer blockbuster, unfortunately. Um, is that why? Because it's written more like a summer blockbuster, where you're supposed to be in on the fun. You're supposed to have a lot of fun. You're supposed to relate to these characters and see through a lot of it. And it's a fun puzzle you could figure out in the audience in the theater with your popcorn. Um, so it's really about the red herrings, I think, because I think that the red herrings here are undersung and large, even more forgotten than these films are. The red herrings are people too, Wes.
They are real people, but I can tell you who else is real people. It's Julie and her friends from the fictional town of Southport, North Carolina, where they all have dreams. They got dreams, lids, they got aspirations. They are graduating from high school. And not only that, but Helen, played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, is our beauty queen. And they're up on stage in, I mean, what looks like a community center slash barn. And they are celebrating because not only has she won her crown and everyone is happy, but they've also graduated, and they're each talking about the things that they're going to do. Helen is going to be an actress. This really is The Kids Aren't All Right Offspring song come to life. Barry is off to New York. Julie is off to school and or college, and I don't know what Ryan Phillippe's character is going to do, but he was doing something cool.
He's going to just be rich. I think that's the plan. Trust fund, wallow in his trust fund. This movie opens up with, I believe it's Summer Breeze, the cover song by Typo Negative. And I had forgotten entirely about that. So I was like, I have got high hopes. So I think that part of that helped taint my like helped instill a more appreciation off the hop, where we'll talk about their disrespect of punk or goth subcultures in a bit. But opening with Typo Negative was cool. That was a bit of a deep cut and really unexpected. And the opening does feel like a completely different movie. It feels like the end of a different movie. It feels like the beginning of Lost Boys in some ways. It's a very ominous, creepy, dark. I want to watch the movie that this beginning could also match, right?
It reminds me, Lost Boys is a good pull. The Craft, it could suit something like Blair Witch, or Blair Witch 2, maybe even,
Book of
especially.
Shadows, yeah.
And or perhaps even like a sex thriller like Poison Ivy, something like that. But you're right. And one of the things when I had returned to this film a couple of years ago to rewatch it, it had also been a long time for me since I had seen it. And that same Hypo Negative song hits you appropriately with these vistas of the ocean and these island cliffs, like lapping waves, doesn't it? Like there's just something so relaxing and cool, and everything is overcast, and the blues are so dark, the water almost looks black, and you really are set a tone which in some ways the film doesn't ever reach the promise of this intro. But on the other hand, I do think that this muted tone really differentiates it from the other teen slashers that were coming out in this time frame.
Especially teen slashers that begin with a shot outside the school with some raucous rock music playing, and they have like people's names introducing them, much like The Faculty. I'm picking on The Faculty right now, or many other films.
Talk about night and day. Like that's a perfect example. This was only 1 year later. The Faculty came out in 98. So we are tonally, this isn't a music video.
It's a whole different sort of tone on the color palette and in mood and in the camera usage. We don't see these sort of panning, sweeping shots again at all, I don't think, until maybe on the boat, which is at night. So also dark and full of crashing waves and such, but still has an action atmosphere. So it's a completely different thing. We don't, like, it's like this is directed and photographed by a completely different crew, for whatever reason. But I mean, it worked. It got me intrigued. I mean, it probably had people sit up in the theaters thinking they're going to see The Ring or something.
Yeah. And again, there's a couple of moments in which this film demonstrates its budget, $17 million, which doesn't seem like a lot of money to 2025. But remember, this was being released in 1997, $17 million. Think about that. A slasher movie. A slasher movie. These things were made for a fucking dime. This was $17 million. And in these sweeping shots and the whole boat sequence, one thing that goes through my mind when I watch that is like, this is expensive. This is an expensive sequence to do this for, again, a slasher movie. And I'm not trying to sound reductive. I love slasher movies, but I'm trying to tell you that they looked at what these films had made. Scream had made $250 million globally. They were like, we're spending 17 million to make this thing look good. And it does look good. The dark hues and blues continue on when we get back to the beach with all of our characters celebrating and hanging out. They go for a bit of subversion here before Julie stomps all over the gothic subculture of New York that I'm sure she read about in a book somewhere, because they very quickly try to establish that she's got the brains, she's going to school on a scholarship. But the subversion that I'll touch on briefly is she and her boyfriend have sex. That is the very start of the movie. It throws things into context. Into a different context, because whereas Scream was emphasizing, they couldn't go 5 minutes without emphasizing that Sidney Prescott was a virgin and her mom's a whore. That's the movie. Have you never seen Scream? Sidney's a virgin, her mom's a whore. For 4 movies.
Yeah, it's a thread. It's a thing.
But anyways, then they go into celebration again because they're having a good time.
Having a good time, having sex on the beach, planning their futures, slightly tipsy, maybe drunk, which is a normal thing, I suppose, when you live in a beach town. They're very beach town. You get this very affluent beach town, white, well-adjusted, successful kids. And they start telling scary stories, because this is a horror film, and it starts out with that meta point, which I brought up earlier, where they talk about urban legends, because now they're relaxed, right? They're talking about the future. They're in a good mood. They got the glow from the booze and each other's friendship. And tomorrow, the world is their oyster, right? So they're capping that off with talking about urban legends, which is adorable. But, it's very natural. And I think that that's part of not only just this film, but it's the whole meta narrative thing. What people are, I think, getting at I watched a video not long ago about the IKEA effect and why people love IKEA so much, because it's something you do yourself. It's that being involved in something, having a hand in the creation of the object is why people love it so much. And I think there's a little bit of IKEA effect going on here, because you've probably, if not had a campfire story or an urban legend story shared amongst you and your peers at one point, maybe not this specific one, but maybe if you're lucky, it is. So you feel like you are hunkered down, regardless of your age or station in life, with them at this fire, talking about the guy with the hook. And no, I heard it this way. And I think that that's the IKEA effect on full blast here. Is you've not only had that conversation about, oh, did you ever hear this story about this guy who like haunted lovers lanes and like killed teenagers that were making out or whatever, and then you're like, oh no, I heard it this way, that he follows them home and then he flashes his high beams, and they're like, oh no, that's a different story, I heard this one. So it's that act of like correcting each other and telling their different versions, which I find brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And hopefully we'll talk a little more about that when we talk about urban legend. But another film in this cycle that I am excited. I haven't read the chapter on that movie in Alex West's book yet, but I'm going to. But I think that's part of what the magic is of this film. If that beginning scene didn't make you sit down and go, whoa, I'm in for something really special here. This is eerie and beautiful and creepy and relaxing. Now I'm at a fire with my friends.
Very well put, man. Sorry, I was just like I was like, yes, you really have me locked in with what you were saying.
That's the IKEA effect, man.
And what's wild is that they don't waste too much time. Our inciting incident takes place barely 10 minutes into the film. And that is Ryan Philippe's character being a drunk douchebag, which he plays really well.
He does. It's that blonde curly hair, right?
And he does kickboxing. Jeez. But he is very drunk, can't drive his car, so he is in the back seat with Helen. And we have, Freddie Prinze Jr. and I'll probably call them by their characters' names eventually, and Jennifer Love Hewitt in the front. A bottle is dropped. He is distracted at the wheel for a moment, and boom, we hit a person. They think perhaps it was a dog, perhaps it was a deer. Julie finds a bloody boot, and oh my God, there is a body, and they're screwed. Now, we have seen films do the, oh my God, we've killed somebody. The House and Sorority Row comes to mind. And it's easy to nitpick these sequences. And I'm not going to give this scene a pass, because I don't think that their lives were as over as they thought they were, because they kind of, any logic or reasoning that the people seem to have are immediately thrown out the window by one character or another saying they're never going to believe that. So they are attempting to protect themselves, yet at the same time paying very close attention to what a very, very, very drunk teenage boy is trying to argue with them. And so it's hard as an adult to watch this scene and think that it works. I don't necessarily buy it. However, what I will say for this film in its defense, I didn't notice it when I was a teenager watching this film initially. It made perfect logical sense to me.
Yeah, because not only like, oh, their lives would be ruined, especially the poorest one out of them all, his life will be ruined. The beauty queen, I mean, kiss Hollywood goodbye. The rich guy, kiss your trust fund goodbye. You're going to be behind bars. Like, okay, I guess that speaks to someone younger. And yeah, people's lives are ruined by stupid, tragic accidents. That's what they're called, stupid, tragic accidents. But the thing that bothers me the most about this is, and I had this conversation not long ago with someone I know, uh, who had sustained an injury while they had been drinking and opted to not go to the hospital because they'd been drinking. It's similar to this. It's like public service announcement. Just go to the hospital, go to the authorities, whether you're drunk or stoned. It doesn't fucking matter. It does not matter. You're hurting more things by avoiding the consequences. That's also adults speaking. You're very right. It's not noticeable necessarily as a young person, except we've seen a lot of stories like this and had even by that point. And most recently, I've read Ronald Malfi's Small Town Horror. So if you like this sort of like, I Know What You Did Last Summer vibe for grown-ups, where grown-ups still don't fucking go to the police because they're drunk or whatever, Ronald Malfi books are a great spot for that.
Also, if you're an adult and you have a hard time with this type of thing, one thing that I will say for people who insist on nitpicking the cinema sins of it all that has been a plague on our society, this is just to get the plot rolling.
Yeah.
So, I mean, could they have taken a few more minutes to get it a little bit more solid? Maybe. But if this didn't happen, then I guess credits. Like it's a court procedural where they're talking to police, and we don't want to do that. That's not the movie. It's a slasher movie, and we're here to have some fun. And so they decide to dump the body. Now, this couldn't possibly have gone worse. They can play tricks on themselves with some logic by saying it was an accident. Why throw our whole lives away? Everything is just starting, and we have we have so much potential that could be ruined by this one little mistake where we weren't doing anything wrong because we did the designated driver thing. The sober person was driving and we were paying attention to the road. It was an accident. Why was he out in the middle of the night in the outskirts of town? All valid questions. Now he does wake up as they're trying to dump his body, and they proceed to dump his body anyways. And they all, by the way, know for a fact that he had woken up.
Which I think it owes to the horror of it. Like if there's a horror aside from just the general atmosphere of all of this to be had, it's that they are kind of stone cold and freaking out by that point and thinking like, well, we had already committed to the idea that he was dead and we killed him and we're going to cover it up. So as soon as that kind of gets shaken a little, they're like, no, we're sticking to this. We are doubling down. You are dead and we are killers. It's very strange. It's a very strange turn of events. I mean, the nitpickers might have a little comeuppance if they've never seen this film at some point where it might be not their fault at all for a minute, but that's just another sort of twist in this whole idea as to who they hit and why they were out there. But I find it fantastic. So we start out with this little group. They've killed this guy, but they've also got their little enemy, their little frenemy, Max, who has sort of stumbled upon seeing them do this. Now, that feeds into some potential red herring stuff later on.
Yeah, it's old Johnny Galecki from Roseanne fame, and I guess The Big Bang Theory, but he'll always be David from Roseanne, the lovable little mop top artist with a heart of gold. And it's always a welcome sign to see him in this, especially in this era. Again, it's just owing to the whole 90s of it all, just trying to get as many recognizable faces, even for a bit part. It's kind of a thankless role for him to play. And then we cut to, once they get rid of him and they go their separate ways, the group will go their separate ways. It's 1 year later, Lydia. And Julie is waiting to go home for the summer. Here's where this film really, really shines to me, because I've had a very common complaint when I am discussing slasher films. And it's a bit of the forgetful nature of our characters. These characters in these types of horror films are friends. Yes, there are many dynamics within these groups, and some people are boyfriends, and some people are cousins, and some people are douchebags that don't really like each other, but hey, he's the one with the car or he's the one with the cabin, and this is how come we're all hanging out. But this film deals with, and there are other slashers that deal with it too. Of course, The Prowler comes to mind. Happy Birthday to Me comes to mind. But this film really delves into what is the cost on your mental state for, as a group, killing somebody, accidental or not, and then ditching the body.
I like those sorts of stories. I do, because I could see the most well-adjusted people not being able to handle it. Now, if this had happened to somebody in, say, the movie Heathers, then it doesn't weigh on them so heavily because they were either prepared for this in one way or another, or a secret killer in the making anyhow. The nature or nurture debate as to what sort of home life they had that prepared them for having committed murder accidentally and being okay with it. And then you have the moneyed douchebaggery of it all with the "I'll handle it. Let's just all forget it. Yeah, it happened. Whatever. Let's get on with it."
He does seem to be the most well adjusted of the group. Helen never makes it to Hollywood or becomes an actor in New York. She tries to go to New York, and she ends up working in her father's store, kind of a mishmash of clothing, jewelry store, small town Sears. I don't know what you would call it. It's a small. To me, it looked like a secondhand store for a bit, but I think it actually is supposed to be where new stuff comes in. And Julie, valedictorian. She's got a scholarship. She is the smart one. She's struggling in school. She is gaunt. She is pale. She barely eats. She doesn't really sleep. She's certainly not doing well in her studies. She doesn't call home. She hasn't come home to visit. Only when summer vacation starts and she has to leave school does she dare return home. And she's not happy about it. Her friends in college notice that there's something wrong, and her mother asks if she's on the drugs.
I think it's kind of hilarious. I don't mean to laugh, but it's like this was sort of the everyday for someone who was not popular, successful, had a scholarship, and just looked gaunt and struggled in their studies every single day. As a, I didn't struggle too bad in my studies, but this reminds me of a lot of people I knew and certain aspects of myself in her down phase, when she's got greasy hair and she's sleepless and angry and anxiety ridden. Yeah. It's kind of laughable in a way, unfortunately, because a lot of people just subsist like this, and this is her torture? Oh, okay. Well, la di da.
Well, she didn't become one of those goths, at least aesthetically, that she was worried that her ex boyfriend was going to fall in love with.
Who hasn't really gone anywhere either. Like where has Ray ended up?
Well, he's a fishmonger like his dad.
And that is the small town defeat, if I've ever read one. I mean, he seems to have a good job and be very well adjusted, as far as Barry, on one hand, being well adjusted in the anger muffin way, but Ray is like semi forgotten about it. We find out a little more about his true feelings about what they did last summer later on in the film, but he's working. He's working hard. Nothing like a physical job to get your head right.
Yeah, I mean, I can attest to that. I pick stuff up and put it down all night long. But what is going to happen is Julie is going to get a mysterious letter that her mom's going to hand her from somebody who just so happened to know that she was in town. And of course, the letter says, I know what you did last summer. Now, cool as a cucumber Julie will act like the guiltiest person on earth. And instead of coming up with some kind of quick thinking lie, she is the smart one, mind you. She will she will essentially quickly pull the letter away, say it's nothing, and then run like a chicken upstairs, where she begins her attempt to reconnect with people. Now, initially, she doesn't even know that Helen is still in town, but of course, going to find where her number. Can you imagine? Imagine I got to go to her family's place of work to encounter her sister so that I could figure out what her number might be in New York. Could you think of anything more archaic? Fucking dinosaur days. Nowadays, everyone's just connected. But back then, you had to do some sleuthing. Do some real sleuthing just to find out what your friend's phone number is that you haven't spoken to in a year. May as well be 20 years.
I don't know. That's small town to me. On one hand, not a lot of people are on Facebook anymore. There was a time when social media was king and no one really needed to talk to one another anymore. But a lot of people have fallen out of that. So I could definitely see myself rolling into my friend's tattoo studio to ask so and so's phone number. But I don't call people. So yes, welcome to 2025. But yeah, it is kind of archaic and it's adorable because that's the only like really small town thing that they really do, because it's weird that they fell out of touch over a year anyway because of even if one of them remained in this small town, they would all have tabs on one another because that's just how small towns work. But they really did stick their heads in the sand big time. I mean, of course, they reconnect and realize that this exclamation point Sharpie, like, that's the thing about the letter, that I know what you did last summer exclamation point with a Sharpie. It's not very foreboding.
No, I suppose it's not. I think that it also like he's got really neat printing, so that's what's
Yeah.
really sanitized about the entire thing. It's not even a jigsaw magazine puzzle. It could be,
Or a torn piece of paper. It's like a
yeah,
flashcard.
yeah. It's like he
He went
gave him
into
a cue
Staples.
card.
Yeah, he went to Staples and picked up some Sharpies, envelopes, and like his shopping trip beforehand. And like, did he practice writing the note? Like, did
You know,
he decide?
next to his desk, there is a garbage can, a little metal garbage can filled with crumpled up little pieces of paper, and it's mounding over. And he writes one and he crumples it up all mad and he throws it and like lands on top but falls off because there's just so much crumpled paper with all of his handwritten notes on it.
Testing it out with like two exclamation points. Should I put one after I know as well? Like, yeah, that's what I picture because it's so neat. It's not written in anger or haste. It's, I don't know, a memo.
Yeah, well, he tried the ones with the frowny faces, but he thought it looked too childish. So
Unreal. And then it turns into like a Bob Summer Party Massacre looking dude after, kind of Canadian tuxedo. Yeah. Yeah.
hell yeah, it does. But I could tell you who is not convinced. Barry, she has Helen in tow. They go to the richest kid in all of town, and they go to this humongous fucking mansion, and they try to discuss her options. Now, Barry is convinced that it's just a prank, or you did a lot of things last summer. She rightfully brings up the fact that, yeah, I only committed one murder though. And his egregious outburst of rage was so well done because to me, it really shows that he's teetering. He is so desperately terrified that this will get out because it will ruin what I could just imagine for him is just a very enjoyable lifestyle, which,
Mhm.
he wants to hang out and do kickboxing and be rich. And he doesn't really want to worry about all of that stuff. So he goes to put the screws to the guy that he thinks is responsible because he's going to go to the wharf and he's going to encounter Max, whom he also hasn't spoken to at least in a year, the way that Max reacts. And Barry scares the shit out of him by grabbing an ice hook and threatening to leave them alone. And there's something kind of amazing to me about Max's reaction, because he acts only startled long enough to get his bearings, and then he really kind of like takes it back. Like he's like, okay, like almost like, come off it. Like, what the fuck's the matter with you? Like, there's a dude that's brandishing a hook in your face, and he doesn't really seem as scared as you want. He gathers his nerve a little bit later. And so here is really our first red herring, because you think that perhaps maybe it was Max, but this scene alone kind of dissolves that possibility for me as somebody who watches a lot of horror films, and I'm sure for you as well.
And Max's anger that Max doesn't lord it over him, that Max doesn't just let him, just doesn't go ragdoll and let him get his anger out, knowing that he'll murder him shortly anyway, or something like that. The tables are turned quite swiftly with any of our doubts with Max. Pretty soon that possibility of him being the person that is writing these notes evaporates. But I really did like this, because at first he seems to be like scared or disbelieving, sort of like he would have been in the school, because I guess they've treated him like dirt all of their lives and through high school. And now this is a year later where he kind of, it's something, the thing that clicks, I think, is just like, wait a second, we're fucking adults here. I'm at my place of business, you goon. And I really do like that.
Yeah. Yes, really, truly. They don't pull the taffy on Max as a possibility, because he's also going to be our first official slasher kill. Now, we know that we've seen a body get hit by a car before, but this is our first real kill, and also the most graphic kill in the entire film.
Yeah, and it is graphic, though still PG-13. They use that hook to great effect. We had the foreshadowing of it being hooked up, and the camera lingers on it just so we know that it's going to be used very, very soon. I do enjoy this. There's been a few enjoyable horror movie type scenes already so far in this film. Like the first real kill that we have with getting hit by the car, that's not very graphic, not too gruesome, just kind of shocking. I'm more worried for Barry because he's standing up in the car when they hit this person, and that's almost more scary to me. And then we have the subsequent drowning, where they actually end up underwater with the killer, which is a little goony, that scene. So this is the first like real dyed in the wool slasher moment where we get a decent kill and a lot of fighting, very physical fight, and we see that this person is wearing a slicker.
Yeah, which a lot of people in this town wear lids, because this is a fishing town, and as such, everyone, it's like Castle of Blood a few episodes ago, where everyone had a candelabra.
Mhm.
Now everyone is going to have a rain slicker that looks like it's like out of the 1940s. But he does acquire his weapon of choice, which is going to be this hook for the remainder of the film. But we need to get to the bottom of this. And before anyone gets to the bottom of it, we need to understand that our slasher is serious. Now, they don't know that anything happened to Max, but Ryan Philippe's character is going to know, because he is going to go to the gym and then shower in what looks like a bunker. It's really crazy, the sort of like metal siding that is everywhere in a shower for a gym, but I digress. The His beloved car, because he's going to get a Polaroid lids of his car outside in the parking lot, and he thinks Max is screwing with him because he went to go threaten Max. And this is going to result in his character getting rammed through a wall with his own vehicle, and he's going to see our fisherman with the hook looming over top of him. Now, you think our killer will strike, and perhaps if this was any other killer, they would. But no, hesitation. Why?
I don't really know, actually, when I think about it now. Because if they were really hell bent on revenge, they wouldn't want this person to make it out alive. Would they want the person to continue thinking that there's somebody else?
I think that it would come down to the psychological warfare of it all. Cruelty is the point. He wants them to sit with the guilt for 1 year. And then he wants them to be afraid because first they're going to fear that somebody knows. And that's the ultimate fear when you have a secret so terrible that you would do anything to keep it from coming out. And they all made a pact, Lydia. You can't just go back on a pact. So it has to be somebody else. And
Mhm. That's that
then
torture
what?
and the terror of like snipping off the corner of Caesar's cape.
Yes. And it could be also a little bit of I can get you whenever I want. Almost like the strangers. In the strangers, the bagman shows that he can get into the house anytime that he wants. It's not
Mhm.
about killing you, it's about terrorizing you.
Hmm. See, I didn't fully understand the motivations of this person, and I don't all the way through to the end because, I mean, I don't know who's more in the wrong. The people that smashed into somebody drunk on a country road and didn't go to the police, or this person who's pulling the taffy and terrorizing people who are only tangentially involved with their revenge scheme. But I digress. It makes for an interesting theatrics, and it does get the gang all together again because Barry isn't all that tough. He does end up in the hospital.
Yeah, and this is where the film is very interesting because we are not going to pick off our characters immediately, probably because we have such a small cast to begin with. Yes,
Mhm.
we have some bonus bodies. And yes, in the history of slasherdom, there are plenty of slashers in which really only one or two people are killed. And some slashers in which nobody is killed except for the slasher. But when you take into account what people were kind of expecting. Again, this is another thing that this film attempts to do, to Williamson's credit, mind you. I've not read the original 1973 book, so I don't know how close this was. But again, going into the original mystery of all of this, it kind of all falls apart if people just immediately start dying that are very critical to the plot. And so very much now we have a situation in which, Barry's been compromised. And next will be Helen, because she is going to be part of a parade. Because, by the way, this is almost the 4th of July, and there's some pageantry to have to proceedings to occur. And she is going to be part of this like beauty pageant. She was the winner last year. She's going to be on the float, kind of passing of the torch to the new people. It's tradition. She wants to be there. She is fussing with her hair. She's having a bit of harsh words with her sister Elsa, who is her boss now. And I think what they're trying to paint here is an animosity between sisters, where one was perhaps quote unquote the favorite who was leaving town to become an actress, and now she's a failed actress, and now she finds herself in a subservient position to her sister, who's apparently supposed to be the plain one of the two. But I mean, it's ridiculous. But then she is going to wake up, Helen is going to wake up, and her hair, her beloved hair, is going to be butchered, Lydia, butchered by scissors.
Which is creepier than they let on. There's a couple things about this character and her death that are highlighted really well in Alex West's book. So if you're very interested in that, like I highly recommend the book as it is for this clutch of films. But she has a lot to say about the life and death of this girl. Helen is a very interesting character. Um, I find it's creepy, and it's not mentioned quite how creepy it is that someone got into her house and did this to her. Like that's the real terror here. That's the scariest thing in the whole thing is that the killer was in the house with her. And that
Hmm.
also makes you think that, well, it must be someone they know, someone who could skulk around outside the house or get in the house without drawing much attention. And it helps this whole red herring situation that we're about to get another layer into. But yeah, she's freaking out. You know, what she needs is a wig now. She still doesn't look too bad.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But I suppose if your whole identity is, I'm pretty and I love my hair and I take care of myself, I suppose it would be very traumatizing for that to happen. I mean, I would be upset if I woke up and someone had been in my bedroom and I had slept through my hair being cut and woken up. Who knows when this person did this? Who knows when they left? They have written soon yet another threat on this, on this group of people and Helen specifically. And the final threat, well, the second to last threat, we think, is going to be probably the hardest to explain how the fisherman has accomplished this. But Julie is going to go to her car and open up the trunk. She is going to find, infested with crabs, Max's body. And there is, again, there's just hundreds of crabs in there. She is going to rightfully scream, run away. And when she brings Barry and Helen back, somehow in broad daylight on the side of a suburban street, the fisherman had returned, removed the body, and removed all of the crabs, and the back of the trunk is pristine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Magic. They're obviously hallucinating all of this, you know, and that would have been a whole other movie. Is that they've all fucking snapped, and one of them is killing the rest of them. Yet they're also all hallucinating. And if you're interested in books where people hallucinate murders continuously and you don't know who's who and what's a red herring and what's what, I recommend Riley Sager books because I just read one that is almost exactly that. But I digress. Again, the fact that this happened again leads us to believe and feeds the whole red herring thing. It's got to be someone they know. It's got to be someone that doesn't attract any attention. This can't be a fisherman running around in a slicker because it's not foul weather. Everyone in the fishing town would wonder why someone's wearing foul weather gear in broad daylight, right? In summer. It's been a year, it's July or the beginning of July. So, you know, it's not the right time or place to be wearing that outfit. They would draw mad suspicion. So it's just got to be somebody they know.
Well, thankfully, Lids, they live in the era of the internet. And so, by using some kind of search engine, who the hell knows, Alta Vista, Ask Jeeves, they're doing
Uh,
something.
their dog pile, which still exists, they're searching the so-called internet on a potato.
And we know that Julie also has done her own research. David Egan, that's the name of the person that they killed that night. His body was found a few weeks later, pulled up in a netting of a boat, and it was deemed an accident, and everyone else had moved on. What I'm hearing is they got away with murder. So perhaps everything is scot free, which is the best case scenario for you to hit somebody in your car, I suppose, as opposed to like the real best case scenario, not hitting anyone with your car ever. But in this case, we know that there is a chance that perhaps this David Egan had a relative of some kind. Is it possible? And they can just look that up and they find out that he indeed did have a sister. And
Hmm.
perhaps it would be worth paying them a visit. I like how it's Julie and Helen that do all of the legwork in this, like literally all of the legwork, the investigative process of this. It's you have Barry and Ray who just want to put their heads in the sand and don't really want to be involved. And not only that, but when they come up with plans, the only person who's really on board with anything is Barry. The entire time, Ray just doesn't want anything to do with it. Which again is leading into another red herring territory, because don't worry, he also got a note. We never see this note. We never have any proof of it, but everyone just has to believe him. And they are going to go to this woman's house, and this woman named Missy, played by Anne Heche.
A really wonderful role. I like this role as much as I hate it, because there are some things about this setup to it that I just cannot fathom. They, yes, do all the legwork, the two girls, in a Bobbsey Twins, Nancy Drew, Sweet Valley High kind of way, cracking little jokes about how they're little Angela Lansburys, little Jodie Fosters. They're not taking it very seriously. They're going about this kind of ham-fisted, and it smacks of a sideshow kind of, let's go see how the other half lives. One hand, they're in a good place by, like, I want to get to know the family member of the guy we accidentally maybe killed. And that they have their hearts in the right place, sort of. The way they go about it, not so much by sneaking and lying. And it's just another layer of terrible act on top of their initial terrible tragedy. So I don't like it for that reason. For the first reason, I don't like it. And I also don't like the portrayal of somebody who lives in the countryside as a kind of simpleton. And that is how Missy is coded, as an angry, tough, simpleton person who has like very simple emotions about her uncomplicated relationship with her dead brother. And it's just too much of like the, oh, y'all's from the city, we don't get much of your kind around here. It's an inch away from that sort of behavior. And I don't like it. But I do also, on the other hand, love, because I love rural horror, going out to the countryside, feeling the temperature rise 10 degrees, having everything with a coat of dust and too much sun. It feels like home. So they do set this up it's set dressed perfectly, and Hesh does it perfectly, is dressed really well, and her character is done well, but it's just that juxtaposition between her and the Sweet Valley High Bobbsey twin sleuths who are going out there to crack the case wide open and go about it in a ham-fisted, see-through, my car broke down kind of way. Can't I don't like this scene for that.
It's almost as if they didn't have a plan going into that. In that drive to the boonies, did they not at least once discuss how they're going to explain why they're there, and how they're going to explain how they're going to leave, or perhaps do a less lazy script in terms of how they were going to pump Missy's character for information? There's also one aspect of this scene that I couldn't quite get out of my head, because it seems as though, for starters, this film takes place in a fictional town of Southport, North Carolina, which is a seaside small town. Small town. And they emphasize this again and again, how this is a small, very close-knit community. Yet no one seems to really know anybody. Some of these people are graduating just a couple of years behind everybody. They would have been in high school in and around the same time, or at least elementary school, and these people were in high school. Some of the people that they're talking about graduated in 1992. It's 1997, and this is taking place 1 year later. So they were in high school at the same time. They would have been seniors while these people were juniors. So it's really strange to me. And not only that, but Missy and all of them went to the same school. And so Missy also describes things about an accident that happened 1 year previously in the exact same location. And the only one, Helen's like, oh, yeah, I think you don't remember somebody dying in your small town in an accident? And then 1 year later, you killed somebody? You don't remember that? When they go back to Missy as well, they're still, it's like they can't decide whether this is a small town or this is like a huge city, and Missy's from a small town, because Missy's talks about the small town as if Helen and Julie don't fucking live there. I
Yeah.
just don't understand it.
And they've only been gone a year. It's not like 10 years later, which would explain a lot, especially with fuzzy memories and such. But yeah, and they are all very close to that high school age. It's not like this incident that happened the summer before happened years after high school. It was a graduating year.
Yeah, Missy isn't like some wizened old, like, you're talking about my brother? Well, let me think back. Oh, he died some 45 years ago. It's not that. She's a young woman. Like, she doesn't even look like she's 30. So, I mean, it's just, again, this is nitpicky shit. It doesn't ruin anything for me, but I do agree that this scene is a bit ridiculous. And what's more ridiculous is the plot points that they attempt to get out, because we are going to be introduced to the fact that her brother, Missy's brother, he had a friend, Billy Blue.
Billy Blue.
And
such a see-through name.
David Egan had a friend, Billy Blue. And Billy Blue could be the person that they're looking for. It's a wild stretch. It's as if you were said, we killed Wes. I heard he had this friend, Lydia. Do you think she's killing us because we killed him? Like, are you trying to? I'm sure he had more than one friend.
Well, I don't know. I'm not living out there in the sticks. Don't have much friends, you know. Heard he had a girlfriend, but no one knows what happened to her. What, like, very, very strange way that they create too much distance in these people. But they do it again with Helen's death too, because she has a very big city death for a small town girl. It's a very, very strange the way that they try and make this town kind of elastic. But I can live with it, except that this scene is like carrying a lot of weight, and it's handled so ham-fistedly. It's almost like they were running out of money or time or something, and they had to shove these scenes through when they could have just tweaked them a little bit to make them a little more believable, a little less offensive to people who live in the countryside, a little more believable to people that live in small towns and know how people operate. They could have explained it away with having two separate high schools, because where I live, there was a country high school and city high schools. And you either went to the country high school, the city high schools, and those people did not fucking know each other, because there was, an hour and a half drive between these two locations. That would have explained it to me.
I would like to take the opportunity to explain something, Lydia. We have to back up a little bit of the plot. And when I was watching the film, I did want to discuss this because it's the most famous scene in the movie, and we did kind of gloss over it. Once everyone has received their various threats and they do have a bit of information, there's the very famous scene in which Jennifer Love Hewitt is going to scream to the heavens, "What are you waiting for?" The reason why I wanted to cite this scene is because I really see Williamson's hand in this. Because when you look at the scene within context, it is very bizarre. Because it's as if, even with Julie's frustration, the scene elevates to a level in which I don't understand how she reaches that emotional peak so quickly, or why. Particularly since so much of this film is trying to have the conceit that they don't want people to know that they have, in their estimation, committed a murder and then covered it up. And yet all of this stuff is happening in broad daylight in the middle of the street. Would anyone question why Julie as a character is screaming at the top of their lungs while spinning around, "What are you waiting for, huh?" Now, I'm not saying that people would immediately say, "Well, I think those kids have committed moida." I don't think it's that.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's really bizarre. And here's my theory. Because there's a scene very much like this in Scream, in which Randy screams in the video store, "Everyone's a suspect." And when you watch that scene in Scream, one of the worst scenes in any fucking movie I've ever seen, you ask yourself, why do you, oh, it's for a trailer. The only reason why you put this scene in is so you can be in the trailer. And what scene is in the trailer for I Know What You Did Last Summer? What are you waiting for, huh? It became one of the most famous scenes because it was used in advertising. But when you watch the scene, it kind of comes and goes like a fart. And I don't really like it. It's cringy. Like, there's no other way to say it. And I really feel like Williamson wrote that scene with the like, "And this is for the trailer." Aw, yeah. But that's all I wanted to say about that.
No, because you could deliver that same line with a clenched fist through clenched teeth and just sort of say it amongst your friends and like look out at the ocean while you're saying it and have it have meaning. But no. Instead, you suck all the meaning out of that and make it ridiculous because, most film goers don't think about the wider picture and who's standing on the edge of that scene looking over at these teenagers with one of them spinning around yelling at the sky, wondering what is wrong with kids these days.
Well, yes, they would be scary. No, they'd be more scary if they also were holding skateboards, though. That's the scariest teen.
Let the pearl clutching commence.
We don't have time for pearl clutching, Lydia. We got to go to a 4th of July parade. Helen is not going to miss that for the world, and Barry is going to be there as her bodyguard. There's a sweet moment between these characters that you could tell that they haven't really interacted with each other, and not only that, but Barry is kind of obstinate when he sees Helen and Julie for the first time. But there's this moment, he's got cuts all over his face, but he looks up and he sees Helen as she was the day before all of this happened, with a crown on her head, smiling and waving. And even though it's performative, even though she's probably still scared, he just kind of gestures very lightly to her crown. And then you see a genuine smile. This is some subtle fucking acting that I really enjoy. And I think that it goes to show you how these actors would go on to do some pretty great roles that would get them a lot of critical attention. And it really, again, allows for a lot of characterization. There is a tenderness between these two characters from this point on in the narrative where you could almost imagine that they might get back together if things proceeded a little bit differently. That's not relevant to the plot, but it certainly is a nice addition for a bit of characterization.
It is. It is short-lived, though. You're right. I do find them very capable actors, even from the beginning. And this is a very important characterization because at this point, like is pointed out in the book about this and other scholarly academic writings about this teen horror cycle, where a lot of them are built on the personas of the actors that are putting butts in seats more so than the plot or the characters themselves. It's like they haven't abandoned entirely that this is a character driven story. But it doesn't last long because we get some slasher film cat and mouse, almost big city level slasher film cat and mouse, again with the elasticity of this little small town where Helen has a police escort and there's murders abound and she's still going to be in the pageant, so she needs some protection, but the killer is out there. Do we not have a scene where many people are wearing rain slickers?
We do, because Barry sees in the crowd someone with a rain slicker, and he scares the shit out of a poor old man with no dialogue who just cowers underneath him while he kind of forgets that he's there for half a minute. And I always wonder, what's the solution to this? once you get up, sorry, I scared the shit out of you, old man, and you thought I was going to kill you. I have more important things to do. I'm Barry, the richest kid in town. But that is one aspect of this film that I find incredibly fascinating. The chase sequence, if you add up the runtime of this film, it's an hour and 40 minutes. If you take the runtime of this film, a not insignificant percentage of it is dedicated to Helen being stalked and killed. It's kind of remarkable, particularly since while Helen is sitting there, Barry is watching the pageant like he was at the beginning of the film. 1 year to the day, he was in that balcony watching her, celebrating her victory. And now Helen, in turn, is going to watch helplessly, for reasons of unknown, as he is rather quickly and unceremoniously dispatched. He does not put up a fight. He is absolutely caught flat-footed and he is killed. And Helen is unable to make her way through the crowd. This, of course, brings a police officer who just happened to be on site. A lot of people, it makes sense. And he is going to see that there's nothing upstairs. He's a cop on his own. And Helen is now by herself. Who the hell knows where Ray is? And Julie is off speaking to Missy again, who's going to give us a bit more details. Well, she looks like a character from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes, she absolutely does. And on, again, one hand, I love it. On another hand, I hate it because she's got this very simpleton look to her, which I cannot stand, making country folk out to be know nothing hillbillies. And yeah, it's kind of depressing. The death of Helen, that whole chase scene, that whole Helen everything that takes up, like you said, a good chunk of this film, it's like it becomes this giallo for that what would otherwise be a saggy center in a film. Normally that saggy middle, which is sort of like boring or predictable or just like redundant, it changes again a little bit of the tone, not to the point that you feel like you're watching a whole other film, but it does explain a lot of that like, I don't know, unowed attention to Helen and her death scene, and makes the town seem so much bigger while immediately making it seem so much smaller when Missy talks about the suicide note that her brother had left. And also, like, sort of brings to mind, like, why a friend of his would go out there if his friend had been despondent or suicidal because of the death of his girlfriend. Like, it adds a whole other layer to this possible red herring who might have more than one reason to be after them. I do like this vaguely threatening Anne Hesh, though.
She reveals that David had committed suicide. Now, Julie insisted that this was not so because you don't understand. David was responsible for the death of Susie Willis. Susie Willis was his girlfriend and they died in a car accident. Everyone in town blamed her. Julie's learning this from the first time, but everyone in town, that happened at this juncture 2 years ago. Everyone in town blamed her. Julia doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about. But Julia insists that this is not true. She insists that I was there and this is what happened. Missy reveals that David left a suicide note. Why would you go there and not commit suicide? You left a suicide note. You went down there. They discovered his body. And Julie says, but I saw him. I saw his Susie tattoo and everything. He ain't got a Susie tattoo. So who does? Who does, Lydia?
Who does indeed? Let's put a twist in a twist. It's a twisty McTwist, I believe. Is this the beginning of the McTwist? It is, I think, one of the most McTwisty twists. Well, who would have a tattoo of her name other than her father? So we'll have to turn to the internet and microfiche to dig up this little tiny gem.
Yeah, and Julie is going to discover that, of course, Susie's father, Ben, was the one who probably is the guy that they hit. Now, they couldn't tell at the time because they didn't really know what he looked like. His face was all messed up. And so now they have a new lead, and she has got to get back. And we're going to get a bonus body as Helen is being escorted by a police officer who, again, is not really believing it. I'm glad he gets his immediately because I hate that. Like, no one's listening to this woman, and she tries to tell about the hook. And he says, again, going to that urban legend, I heard it went this way. And he immediately stops because someone in town is having car trouble. Someone dressed like a fisherman, someone with a fish hook or an ice hook. And this police officer is behind you, behind you. I was like, he was in front of him. He was looking right at the guy. Maybe he might have had a fighting chance if you didn't distract him with all your yelling, Helen. But this is going to bring us to the final leg of the chase sequence, in which Helen is going to make it back to her family's store, and she is going to encounter her sister, who is very slowly going to get the keys and open it. It's a good tension building scene. And now all of a sudden they're in a very scary store filled with mannequins and plastic sheets. And Elsa, again, like the police officer, is dispatched rather quickly. Again, these kills are not very graphic. A splatter of blood against the glass, and we're out of here.
There's a lot of them, though. They have been grouped up in this middle, which is handy because it's not like a bunch of kills at the beginning and end with a whole bunch of story building that puts you to sleep. It's action packed. It's got a very good pace that way. And this more giallo kind of thing has got this Argento kind of lighting. And it's got, like you said, mannequins. What more would you need? A Hitchcock blonde almost in Sarah Michelle Gellar. So it's just a very interesting scene. I do like it, and I do like that we're almost down to the last two. We know everybody's dead, so we're down to Ray and Julie, of course, which is cool because might be running out of teens to kill, but we're not running out of cool clues to find out about who it is that's stalking and chasing and killing them.
Right, and this new bit of information that we have is going to cause Julie to look for anyone that could still help them. And that, of course, will bring Julie to Ray. This is the strangest thing about this film, Lydia. And I have done research, and I'm just gonna say what happens. And then, do you have a theory? This is all I'm just curious. You don't have to have, but maybe you do. Julie is going to encounter Ray. Ray, where has he been? We don't really know. And he is going to come out of his boat. And for the first time, Julie is going to take a look at Ray's boat. The name of Ray's boat is Billy Blue. He says that he can explain, Lydia. We will never get that explanation. And she's going to run away from him because it seems obvious. He's walking slow. He's got his hand out. He's Freddie Prinze Jr. You already can't trust him. Too many names.
All of them have 3 names. They're all like basic serial killers in the making, except one. But like, he wears a raincoat.
That's right. And here's something that they weave throughout the plot line, is that Ray is not like the others. Julie and Helen and, of course, Barry. They're all the rich, popular kids. Don't get distracted by the fact that Ray is a gorgeous, gorgeous tall man with high cheekbones and is clearly also very popular. He's a no good Nick from the wrong side of the tracks or something. He's not as rich. And one of the through lines that you could say with the Missy character and everything that has happened out in the sticks is that this family that was affected by this tragedy was socially othered because they were poor. They were going to they weren't the rich popular kids, they weren't the rich popular families, and there was a stigma on their families from the start. Ray can know what this feels like because he has mentioned several times that he is looking for a higher standing. In the 1990s, the highest standing could be rich and successful, like his friends, but he's always just going to be a small town boy that doesn't really have a lot of money and has to be a fisherman like his father.
Even though he fits into that Abercrombie Fitch mold like everybody else, the variation is just so very slight. And that's another thing that I didn't feel that these movies were for me at the time, because I didn't fit in that mold or have only a slight variation that set me on the edge of it, like it does with Ray's character, where he's just included in this friend group, let alone society, because he's his parents made a little less money or something.
It's hard
But
to say because being a fisherman in a fisherman town, I understand that season to season is going to be different, but are you own a boat? Like are you really not successful? There's lots of very successful people who catch fish for a living.
oh, farmers, fishermen, trappers, hunters, there's all kinds. And I think, though, because this is first and foremost a tourist town, that we've got the Amity problem here, where the beach is going to open, right? So everyone has that shiny, happy people exterior. And that's even more important than the people who really do make this town go, which are the fishermen, obviously.
And one fisherman in particular is going to make Ray go to the ground. I will leave the Billy Blue thing, but do you have an explanation about why his boat is called the Billy Blue?
It could have been his father's boat. I have no idea if he also has three names. I don't know. Maybe one of them is William. I don't really know. But I assume that it was his father's boat, that he didn't name it. And then when pressed for a fake name, doing his own little Angela Lansbury, Jodie Foster moment where he goes to the house with no real plan to try and talk to the girl that was the supposed sister of the guy they maybe murdered. uh he just came to the first name, and it would have been a name that was very familiar to him, probably because I'm assuming, like most of these things are hereditary, it's his father's boat. Billy Blue was the first thing that came to mind. So there's no real explanation as to why. I don't know enough sailor lore. There could be an explanation there. This could be like if it was called the Davy Jones, it would just be a no-brainer. We would just be like, of course his boat's named Davy Jones, because we all know that, sort of tangentially.
I think you're really onto something. I think the thing that makes this so confusing to me, and perhaps our listeners are like, Wes, this is so obvious. This is why it's called the Billy Blue, because he made up a fake name when he was talking to Missy. Yeah, obviously. Okay, that makes a lot of great sense. But none of this happens on camera. And we just learn in a throwaway line that he's conducting this fucking investigation on his own. And again, this is all in service to make you believe, which I never bought for a second, even on the first time viewing this movie, that this was a genuine, like, red herring to the film itself. In the same way that you could kind of make it seem like Elsa was the killer. You could kind of make it seem like Max was the killer. None of that worked to me. It was just a lot of trying to pull you in various different directions to keep the mystery going, but I don't think anyone seriously would have considered it. But it's just, I mean, if it did, it would be just a little too obvious. But that being said, not to rag on Kevin Williamson's writing again, but that dude beelines for the obvious all the time. Like, go back and watch again. Sorry to make fun of it. Go back and watch Scream. Were we really ever meant to not think that it was Billy Loomis? Like, and his ridiculous friend Stu, the two like most outwardly psychotic characters throughout the entire movie. I was like, all right, whatever. But going back to the thing that I want to talk about, this is a guy in jeans slasher, Lydia. We didn't even know it.
We didn't even know it. And it's owing something to the 80s. Like they talk back to horror of yore with the urban legends. And now we're going straight into the 80s. And talking about a giallo too, which would have taken place in the 60s and 70s. Like it sort of subtly, very subtly speaks to horror through the ages, from sitting around a campfire to telling urban legends to having like those strange cat and mouse slashers where people are victimizing women, to these stronger women who are fighting alongside men for their lives on this boat against the 80s yacht rock dad jeans kind of guy who we've also seen strutting like a peacock throughout a sorority house, and as the interstellar rapist of that I know of as Bob from Twin Peaks. So it's this, Canadian tuxedo, strange, overbearing, one-liner, grit teeth, growly guy. I mean, they're always so steely. They smell like diesel. They, very greasy looking dudes. I don't understand what this trope is about. I really don't.
I think it's supposed to just make him seem like an everyman that can blend into the background. He does have an air about him that he would smell like denim and stale cigarettes and grease because he works with his hands and all that kind of stuff. He fucking dummies Ray toot sweet. He clotheslines him and absolutely takes that kid out. It's crazy. But yes, it is indeed Susie's father, Ben, and he is revealed to be our killer. He doesn't have enough memorable dialogue for my liking. Even our killer in Slumber Party Massacre kind of quantifies everything, and that takes a lot of love to do this, and he loves you, and that completes the picture of the character to me. I also wanted to mention that I really like that you brought up giallos, because Helen's stalking scene really, really reminds me of Tenebrae, where there's so many starts and stops to those stalking scenes that end up with the character getting killed. And I will say, for Helen's sake, she put up a hell of a fight in that alleyway, way more than her kickboxing ex-boyfriend. But alas, we are at our finale, and this is a really interesting sequence. I like going through the boat for these stalking scenes. I like having Julie going through all that ice and the ice getting pulled aside, and she's slowly, like a sick funhouse, revealing her own friends' bodies hidden within the ice, and you can see this is where the fisherman has been storing everything. But I find it very odd, going back to the trope, that you had this iconic silhouette with the slicker and the hat and the hook, and they just abandon it. And I think that, coming from the fact that Kevin Williamson wrote this script and they wanted it to be like Scream, and they used the fisherman's guy's silhouette to sell posters and t-shirts and DVDs and what have you. It's wild that the third act, the fight with your killer, he's just a guy. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Some of my favorite slashers are guy in jeans slashers. But I just think it's an odd choice, because you would think that Williamson would want to take another bite at the apple and try to create another strong, like, you know, say what you want about Scream, Ghostface is a strong silhouette, and people really like that look of that particular character. So why not do it again? Why abandon it in the third act? I've never understood that.
Especially when this twist upon a twist, the twisty McTwist, all your red herrings collapsing within like 4 seconds. If you blink, Ian, miss it, or you're not paying attention, you would look at this boat chase scene, which is very bombastic, very dynamic, very action-packed, except for having 2 of the same actors that you've seen in the rest of the film. You could think you're watching a different film, because if you weren't paying attention to who the fuck this guy is, and understanding that he is the dad of the girl that died 2 years ago, which was not even involved with these people, like, oh my gosh. Because what? They screwed him out of killing the suicide victim. They saw him that night and could pin him with the murder of the person who didn't commit suicide. Like, it's also very loose, but it happens so very fast that not only are we ripped off of seeing a guy with a hook in a fisherman's foul weather gear rampaging around this boat, which would have just been cinematic gold, I think. Instead, we get dad jeans. And we're also sort of ripped off of having a very satisfying resolution to this story. Instead, it's a kind of loose twisty twist, which makes me think like they were running out of time and they had to slap this together. That's how it feels to me.
Yeah, the twist is quite bizarre. What has evidently happened, and I'm not going to act like I'm the genius that's got this all figured out. I admitted to Lydia off mics, and I'll admit to you, my dear listeners, because I like you, and I think this builds trust. I have seen this movie at least 5 times, if not more, all the way through. This was the first time while watching it, getting ready for the show, that it actually clicked in my brain what had happened, because I had erased all of this stuff with Susie, all of this stuff with David, and it was boiled down to they hit this dude who just became a murderer because they tried to dump his body. And I guess just for the sake of the fact that it's a slasher, they needed to have bonus bodies, because one of my biggest gripes with this movie was, one, the whole time they just hit a dude with their car and he just became a psycho murderer. Why didn't he ever go to the police? I don't understand. And why did he kill people that were not involved with the crime? And if you're being very technical, only one person was driving. Now, they all collectively decided to get rid of his body, but he didn't even die. So they didn't necessarily try to kill him, but they just tried to ditch the evidence. But so he becomes a killer, and I just didn't understand that there was an extra layer to this in which the person he was there to do, he was on that street late that night because he was killing, on the 1-year anniversary of his daughter's death, his daughter's boyfriend, and he dumped that body in the fucking ocean. And that was the body that they pulled from the river, and that's how come they believed that David Egan was the person that they had hit with their car, when in reality it was Ben. And Ben never died, which absolves our heroes, Lydia. They never killed anyone at all, but they are going to contribute to mutilating this because this guy, because he is going to, with a little help from Freddie Prinze Jr., his hook hand is going to get snared in the netting, and he is just going to yell and scream and flail around, and it becomes like a circus, and he gets caught by his leg. You couldn't plan this better. I'm glad a lot of these actors went on to do Scooby-Doo movies, because you couldn't have planned this better in a Scooby-Doo movie if you tried. And then he just yells at the top of his lungs and sploosh into the water. The least convincing final death of a slasher in the history of slasher movies. At no point does this guy go in the water that do I think, oh yeah, he's definitely dead? What? No.
No, they've still killed somebody if they believe he's dead. They believe he's not going to come back for them, which we already do believe even without the last scene. But yeah, they've now killed somebody. Do you feel still bad? No. They feel absolved. They feel happy about it. But the only real line I remember him having, aside from a few like weird grunts, is when you leave a man for dead, make sure he's really dead. And it's like, well, you have no proof again that he's really dead.
That's very true. He also says Happy 4th of July, Julie, which is great. But yes, that seems to be his entire grievance. The next time you think you leave a man for dead, you best make damn sure that he is dead, because this guy is a fucking. They just so happened to kill or hit with their car a bloodthirsty murderer who really wanted to toy with them and wait for Julie to come back to town to complete his revenge. He wanted them all together. Perhaps that's why he waited. Perhaps it had more to do with the anniversary. He seems to like to commit murders of crimes that happen on that particular road on July 4th. It seems to work out for him, except for this time. And we are going to jump ahead again, back a year. Julie is back in college. She's doing great now. She made the dean's list, and she's back with Ray, who confesses his love. He wanted to get back together with her the entire time, but this perceived crime, they did hit someone with their car and try to ditch the body. That's a crime all by itself. You
Yes.
don't need to kill someone for that to be a crime. Just FYI to our dear listeners who think hitting a man with their car, so long as he's not dead, is not a crime. But this seems to absolve them of that, and he was kind of a dick anyways, so we can get back to our regular lives. And Julie gets her life back, which is something that she has been wanting. She's felt on hold this entire time. And so all is well, but we're still in store for one last scare. And in a shower scene filled with a lot of steam, we get a couple of false starts, a letter, and then I still know. And then the fisherman jumps through the glass.
I could have done without the fisherman jumping through the glass, but having I still know and having that home invasion thing again, that is creepy. And so we have an idea that this is the fisherman come back, but judging from the story that we've already seen, this has got to be his other child or his brother or his dad. Like, it's impossible to tell. I've not seen the follow-up film. I've not seen any of the follow-up films because, as I mentioned, this was not a film for me when it first came out. It's very fun to revisit. So if you, like me, have not watched it since it came out or skipped it when it came out, it's a fun romp. It is a cozy horror on screen. I think it is a good little Sunday afternoon film, and it's got all those horror things. If you don't like over-the-top horror fan service like they have in a movie like Scream or Scary Movie, this is actually just as effective but fun and very gentle-hearted about it all.
And it's a good little summertime film because it does take place during the summer, and also I swear we don't really plan these things. I didn't remember that this took place on the 4th of July. And I also didn't remember that there is another I Know What You Did Last Summer movie. Jennifer Love Hewitt, Freddie Prinze Jr. are back. They're doing a legacy sequel, it sounds like, and it's coming out this month or next month or whatever. And I swear we didn't plan this. It's just one of those little bits of serendipity. So if nothing else, you can get ready for the new movie by watching this one. When it comes to I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, there seems to be a general consensus that the sequels to this film are a decline in quality. Mm-hmm. Although, all the actors that survive from this film return in the sequel, it's not like there's nothing entirely to recommend. I do love Jennifer Love Hewitt, and it's nice to see her again as a final girl. I don't remember how they explain away her not being dead, because the way that this film ends, makes it seem as though, and then she died. But that's not the case. She's very much alive in the next movie, and I can't remember because it's been many years since I have seen I Still Know What You Did Last Summer.
It's something I might have to visit. I don't have Netflix anymore, and that's where I had originally watched this, and I'm sure that the sequels are there. Maybe they're on Tubi, but yeah, it's something that I would like to revisit because I didn't watch them all. I didn't watch a whole bunch of Scream movies either. I think I saw maybe the first 3 Scream movies and just wasn't interested. I didn't know that there was a follow-up to Urban Legend, and that was one that I did like. And that, before you ask, is what we have coming up next.
That's right. For our next film, we're going to be doing the film Urban Legend, which I'm really excited to go back to. Saw this in theaters. I saw the sequel to Urban Legend also in theaters. Like I said, me and my friends around this time just went to the movies all the time, and we would particularly go and see any horror films that were coming out, and that includes the Scream franchise and I Know What You Did Last Summer and everything, because even if I like to dog on a movie, I will watch all of its sequels just to make sure I know that I'm hating it properly.
And that's what I love about you, Wes. Not only that you spent all that time in the theaters so that you can bring that angle to the show, because I certainly did not. But yeah, you wear your hate on your sleeve.
And on that note, I'm Wes Knight.
And I'm Typical Lydia.
And you've been listening to Dead Air. If you like this show, you can find more episodes and other content on splatterpictures.net, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. We also upload all episodes to YouTube now, if you'd prefer to listen that way. You can find us across social media like Instagram, X, and TikTok, and the show is edited by Lydia Peaver and hosted by Lydia Peaver and me, Wes Knight. We'll see you next time.